We are just waiting for Councillor Giles, but I think he's probably on his way, so we'll make a start. Good evening and welcome to this new and old Malden Neighbourhood Planning Subcommittee, whether here in person or watching on the webcast. My name is Councillor Leslie Heap. I'm chairing the meeting this evening. In the event of an emergency and the sounding of an alarm, the emergency evacuation procedure is to leave by the main staircase located behind me, here, not that door, and congregate at the front of the building. Anyone requiring assistance should remain in their seats and an officer will assist you from the building. This meeting is being filmed for live broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel and an archive version will be available to view on the Council's website after the meeting finishes. The broadcast will be suspended during any adjournments in proceedings and if the committee resolves to consider information as exempt business. Please can everyone present in the meeting ensure their mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode for the duration of this evening. Thank you. Just before we begin, the introductions and the members of who's who and who's here, just to let members of the public, I don't think there is, but the application 2401-381/HOU 53 Blakes Avenue, New Malden, that has been withdrawn under paragraph 6.2 of the planning protocol. It will be considered under officer delegated powers as no objectors have registered to speak this evening. So we just have the one application, which is, as you know, 14 Lime Grove. So just to introduce everybody, I'll start on my left-hand side and councillors can introduce themselves to the meeting. Thank you.
Start with me. Working. Okay. Done. Good. Thank you. Councillor Richard Thorpe, representing Roxburgh Park and Old Malden East Ward.
Councillor Andy Sillett, Coombe.
Thank you. And also we have officers. I have on my left-hand side. I have Will Flaherty, who's from planning and will be doing the presentation on this application this evening. And on my right-hand side, I have Sam Nichols from Democratic Services. Thank you. Members of the public are reminded that the planning application process is constrained by the need to have regard to current planning policy at national, regional and local levels, as well as all other material planning considerations, including case law precedent. The decision-making process is often described as quasi-judicial because local planning authorities have to act reasonably with the bounds of planning law and above considerations and are not free to determine planning applications simply because of the weight of public opinion. There is a registration scheme for residents and applicants wishing to participate on the planning applications that are to be considered by this committee. Members of the public who have registered to speak will be invited to come forward to the table in the front of the public gallery at the appropriate point. I don't need to read that bit out, do you? No, that's just... Okay, first item on the agenda is minutes. Are members happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of April 2024? Thank you. Seems a long time ago, but we haven't had any meetings since. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other registrable or non-registrable interests relevant to items on this agenda and any site visits undertaken on any of the sites of application on this agenda. Do members have any declarations of interest? Please indicate now.
I visited the site at Lime Grove on Monday of this week.
Thank you.
So I visited the site today after work around 5:30.
Thank you. Councillor Sirrett?
Yeah, I visited it today.
Yeah, with myself at around midday. So that's that. Okay. Okay, so the application is 2303204/out, the cottage 14 Lime Grove, New Malden, which is for an outline application, demolition of existing dwelling and rear buildings, and erection of one front building and one rear building to create 8 new dwellings with associated parking, bins and cycle provision. Landscaping matters are reserved. So I'm going to introduce Will, who's going to present. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to, would it not be better to wait for Councillor Giles to arrive? Because when he arrives, he won't be able to take part in the meeting.
Unfortunately, that is the case.
Sorry.
We did wait about...
10 minutes. Shall I call him?
Sam has been down a couple of times to check where he is.
Should I call him, Chair?
Yeah, see if he's coming. Thank you. So we will continue and Flaherty will make the presentation of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. So planning application is outline application for demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of 2 replacement buildings, one building to the front of the site comprising 6 units and a 2-storey building to the rear of the site comprising 2 studio units. This slide shows an aerial photograph of the site. It is located on the south side of Lime Grove. To the west of the site is Christchurch School locally listed building, and to the east is Kavanagh Court and Cedar Court, both of which are 3-storey. This slide shows a bird's eye view of the application site, the red dot on both aerial photographs denoting the property to be demolished. And we can also see Kavanagh Court annotated also. This slide shows the main constraints for the site. So on the left, the heritage constraints. The site is located within the Grove's local area of special character. This is a non-designated heritage asset. The school adjacent to the site, that is a locally listed building, also a non-designated heritage asset. And to the south of the site, sharing the southern boundary, is the the Grove's conservation area. It is the Lime Grove local area special character. Apologies. Now, on the right, we can see the parking restrictions. So we have double yellow lines denoted by the yellow and black. We have the kind of no stopping yellow hash lines for the school denoted in yellow. There is no controlled parking zone or controls on the site or neighbouring roads. So this slide shows the existing buildings on the site. We have the main dwelling house to the front and 2 outbuildings to the rear. This slide includes some site photographs. So looking from the left, we have a view of the existing dwelling house to be demolished. So looking southeast from Lime Grove, and you can just see Kavanagh Court to the left. The middle photograph is a site photo taken looking towards the rear of the existing dwelling. You can just see Kavanagh Court to the east or the right-hand side of the photograph above the shrubbery. And then the final photograph on the right-hand side, that is looking southwest towards the front of the existing dwelling house to be demolished. You can also see the single bollard just next to the road. That would be removed as part of the proposals. So we've also already covered exactly what is being proposed, the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of 2 replacement buildings to provide 8 dwellings. Just in terms of unit mix, so we have 3 one-bedroom units and 3 three-bedroom units. They're both in the front building, and then we have 2 studio flats in the rear building. So this slide shows plans of the existing dwelling to be demolished. You can also see the 2 outbuildings. So this is the proposed site plan. We can see the main building to the front. It would have a similar building line to Kavanagh Court to the right, and has similar footprints to Kavanagh Court also. And then to the bottom of the site, the south, we can see the kind of horseshoe shape of the proposed 2-storey building, which contains the 2 studio flats. So this is the proposed ground floor plan. So the flats in the front building, we've got a red dot denoting the 3-bedroom unit. So we can see that it has 2 private amenity space areas to the rear, and it is also a dual aspect unit. We have the 1-bedroom unit also in the front building. I think also worth noting here, we have the main access to the building from the side. So if we look towards the middle of the building, we can see the entrance there, the staircase up to the upper floors. And that being in that position means that the access for the flats to the communal amenity space to the rear is that bit closer. We can also see, so the studio flats at the rear, so it'd be 1 flat per floor, and those would be accessed via the pathway along the west side of the building towards the bottom of the screen. The proposal also includes 2 on-site car parking spaces, which would require a widening of the vehicle crossover and a removal of a single bollard with retention of the other 3 bollards. This is the proposed first floor plan. So again, the layouts for the front building and the rear follows the ground floor layout. 3-bedroom unit stacked above one another, dual aspect units, and same for the first floor studio flats in the rear building. So this is the second floor. So for the front building, this would be within the mansard roof. Again, the 3-bedroom unit and a single bedroom unit. As the rear building is only 2 stories, here we have the kind of green roof shown to soften its appearance. So here's the proposed roof plan. So this shows the green roof on both buildings, the roof lights to provide extra internal daylight, and you can see the ground floor terraced areas for the ground floor unit also. So this slide shows the proposed elevations. So to the front, on the left we have the front elevation, and on the right-hand side is the rear elevation. And this slide shows the side elevations, so we can see the main access to the building, the front building, is shown on the left. And then on the right-hand side, facing Kavanagh Court, we have the false windows to soften the appearance and provide some visual interest. This is the front and rear elevation for the proposed 2-storey building at the rear. So we can see on this slide it's approximately 6 metres in height, or 5.7 metres, so yeah, roughly 6 metres. No habitable room windows on the rear elevations or side to prevent overlooking to neighbours. And this is the side elevation. Again, no clear glazed windows, just false windows to both side elevations. This is a proposed street scene view, which shows the massing of Kavanagh Court to the left, and then also the school to the right. So it would actually be slightly shorter than the highest point of Kavanagh Court. And that's indicative landscaping, as landscaping is to be secured as a reserved matter. So this shows the side elevation facing Kavanagh Court. So there would be timber fencing along the side elevation. And again, this is the west elevation facing towards the school. Now this slide shows separation distances. So between the 2 buildings which are proposed, at its closest point, the buildings would be around 17.5 metres apart. At their furthest point, around 20 metres between facing habitable rooms. And then you can see Kavanagh Court at the top of the slide. This shows that the oblique angles from the habitable room windows is around 25 to 26 metres separation distance. And this slide similarly just shows the separation distance between the rear of the rearmost building, which is 2 stories. So that's 27 metres to the direct rear and 26 metres to the other property shown. So this slide shows the computer-generated imagery shared by the applicant. So this is a visualisation of what the development would look like. It is not an approved drawing. It is only informative to help members gauge how it would look alongside Kavanagh Court, materials, some of the features. For example, some detail is missing from this drawing, such as the 3 existing bollards, which would be retained. So for the avoidance of doubt, this is just for information purposes only, to give you a flavour of what it could look like. And here again, this is a zoom in of the type of detailing which be incorporated into the proposed development. Obviously, we have planning conditions which would secure detailed drawings of this kind of architectural detailing. So this is a landscape plan. So we see there is some landscape to the front of the site, and then we also have the main communal amenity space situated between the two buildings. Again, this is indicative because we do have landscaping details to be secured as a reserved matter, but this gives you a flavour of how the space will be divided. And again, just showing that the green space at ground floor level alongside the roof as well. So also of relevance and a material planning consideration is the planning application reference 23/03205/out. Now this was recently dismissed by the planning inspectorate on the 13th of September. It was for a very similar development, same number of units, same number of car parking spaces, a lot of similarities between this current scheme and what was dismissed. And in dismissing that appeal, the inspector raised two main concerns, and that's the projecting balconies on the front elevation, which were considered to be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and also the balconies at the rear and front, which would result in an unacceptable loss of privacy to neighbours. The planning inspector did not identify any other harms associated with the proposal. As this is a material consideration which officers consider should be given significant weight, I have shown on these slides what the dismissed scheme proposed. So again, this is the ground floor plan for comparison purposes, and we can see it's almost identical except for the landscaping at the front of the site. And then also the access to the front, that has been moved to the side of the building. Those are the two main changes, as you can see here. This is the the first and second floor plans of the dismissed appeal. So we can see here the quite large projecting balconies to both the front and rear. Those were what the inspector took particular issue with, all those balconies. And also from a character and appearance point of view, these are the balconies that were proposed and dismissed by the inspector. So as you can see, they are rather incongruous and not great. So that is the dismissed appeal. Again, the side elevations, you can see they project quite far and they are quite incongruous and prominent. This slide shows the dismissed scheme alongside the current proposal. So the current proposal, it has been submitted to address the concerns raised by the planning inspectorate. So here we can see that the front balconies, they've been removed in their entirety. And also there's a simplification of the material palette. So whereas before there was a mix of render, brick, hanging tile, we just have brick for the main building with hanging tile for the mansard roof. Similarly, this is the rear elevation, so we can see that the rear balconies, which the inspectorate took particular issue with, they have been removed. In their place, there are just two Juliet balconies. So, yes, that's been done to address that concern. And then this slide should be the late material. So members have been circulated late material in advance of the meeting, and there's also a paper copy. So in brief, we received 3 further letters of objection following the publication of the agenda, raising concerns about EV charging points, the accuracy of the CGI, and unclear what provisions are for fire safety. So just to not read out what I've written in the late material, but briefly to confirm, EV charging points, they are covered by condition. There'd be 1 active charging point, 1 passive required. The CGI is indicative only. It is not an approved drawing were members minded to grant permission, just to give an idea of what the development could look like. And regarding fire safety, a updated fire strategy is required via pre-commencement condition to detail how sprinklers would be provided for both buildings. There are also some additional paragraphs to be inserted to the committee report. One, namely relating to policy T6C of the London Plan, which refers to an absence of local on-street parking controls not being a barrier to new development. And if there is an issue, boroughs should implement controlled parking zones. And also in relation to legal agreements, the insertion under paragraph 162 of the committee report to make reference to a financial contribution being made towards consultation for the implementation of a controlled parking zone in the area. There are also a couple of amendments to planning conditions, conditions 9 and 26, just to clarify some points. So for the reasons set out in the committee reports, the late material and the presentation, officers recommend that the planning permission is granted, subject to conditions and to the completion of a legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Will. Just put the lights back on. We have 4 registered speakers this evening on this item. We have Zebig, Blonsky and Jan Comer are to speak as registered objectors this evening, and we'll have 5 minutes between them to speak. Then Councillor Andrew Bolton will be speaking against the application in his capacity as a ward councillor for 5 minutes. Rajan Patel will then be speaking on behalf of the applicant in favour and will speak for 5 minutes. There will be an ability to ask questions of the objectors and the applicant for 5 minutes for each side of the argument. So first of all, I will welcome Zebig and Jan, if you'd like to come to the desk. It should be on, so, get yourselves ready, and when you're ready, Sam will start the counter. Are you just going to speak, Mr. Blonsky, or are you going to share it?
Well, we'd like to share, preferably, but it depends on how quickly Mr. Zig gets through.
Well, we've got this compressed time between the two of us.
Right.
So because of that, I've written out my submission. I'm going to read it out.
Hang on a minute. Okay, yeah, so if you could précis it a bit rather than... Could you précis it rather than verbatim?
On the hoof is going to be very difficult. I'm just saying that I'll be trying to read it as quickly as possible, and in order to assist with comprehension of what I'm saying in terms of actually hearing it and so on, I have printed out
yes,
what
I know you said
saying.
that.
So
yeah.
I would kindly request whether I could circulate that. It's not new material or anything like that. It's actually what I'm saying.
But you said he couldn't do that.
And I know that in the past this has been possible.
Sorry?
It's because it does count as new material, because the committee hasn't had a voice.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
This evening, so it does count as new material.
We time it for 3 and I'll take a minute.
It's counted, your speech or your whatever you're going to say is counted as new material, which we haven't seen before, or the officer or that. So that's why. So
But you're
if
going
when
to
you're
be hearing new material from me, so it's only facilitating proper comprehension of
okay,
what
but
I'm
there is a
trying to say.
5-minute limit. So if you say when you're ready, and we'll start you off on 5 minutes. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, and we'll try and make out as best we can. Just hang on a minute. Right, thank you. Ready?
Okay. This is an appalling proposal, should be refused or at least deferred to be redesigned. The site is in a local area of special character. It joins the conservation area neighbours Christchurch School, locally listed building. The design of the proposed development pays no heed or regard to its location and character of the area. I would urge members to consider this against the factors and considerations in paragraphs 131 and 135 of the MPPF set out in paragraphs 45 and 46 of the Officer Report. In particular, government attaches great importance to the design of built environment, that the creation of high-quality, beautiful, sustainable building places is fundamental to what planning and development process should achieve. Good design is a key aspect. Sustainable development creates better places in which to live and work and helps make development acceptable to communities. This proposal does none of this. Through its various iterations, it seems to have been driven by financial calculations to achieve a certain amount of development through a tick-box approach. This is reflected in the various copycat designs submitted, including an identical version of the development in Villiers Road. How is this reflecting local contextual considerations? Parking and highway safety is not at all addressed by the Officer Report, despite the objections raised on this basis. There's no prior reasoning for the conclusion, paragraph 169 of the Officer Report, and that's why it should be withdrawn. The applicant's own parking study clearly identified the extent of on-street parking stress experienced Lime Grove, indicating that demand exceeds capacity. London Plan's already restrictive policies would allow up to 7 parking spaces and only 2 are provided. Exclusion from any future CPZ would not have any effect until that came into operation. And there is no current or even foreseeable prospect of this. If for no other reason, the consideration of this application should be withdrawn for the Officer Report to address these issues. I note also that in the proposed conditions there's an acknowledgement of overspill parking rising from the development, but it's not dealt with in the report. The last meeting of this committee refused an application involving backland development, and there's very good reason for this to be the case again. The proposed rear buildings would be right on the boundary and would impact adjoining properties. The access to the front of the building would be very narrow, 1.3 to 1.5 metres wide and very, very, very long. The Officer Report confirms this, and distance from the highway to the rear building is 46 metres, which does not comply with building regulation for fire plants. It's also a very long distance for potential occupants and all the uses associated with that through a very narrow passageway, 1.5 metres, not very wide. Would this alleyway be lit at night all the way in the bottom of the garden? What impact would this have on residential property? 1.5 metres is very narrow. Would this be sufficient for wheelchair users to gain access? Will access be level? Have the proposal 2 dedicated... What? Okay. This proposes unacceptable overdevelopment. No site area is given in the report nor density. It could potentially be occupied by 20 people on the basis of the number of bedrooms. The Officer Report describes the location as suburban, but this density is more like inner city. I'm sorry but I'm trying to work in the context that you've given me.
Shall I try and praise
Yeah,
you?
I've finished.
Oh, you finished.
No, I've just explained.
Yes.
I've submitted my apologies for the nature of the presentation.
No, well, because it's such a short time. My main objection is that nothing has changed. I appreciate what you've said about the enhanced pictures that are just for things, but they have totally removed all of the school lines. There is an inherent danger. The reason those bollards are there and the reason those school lines are there are for health and safety. The comments from the planning officer at 130 and 131 are incorrect. School along that side, parking is not allowed during school times, drop-offs or collections. They will not be separated from traffic. That is there to keep children safe. We have had a death in Lime Grove of a school child, but it doesn't come within your 5 limits. There are many reasons why this particular risk is
1 minute
not
remaining.
acceptable. So the other issues that you have said in your own refusal of this property is that no way could they allow removal of the allowing cars to transverse. He says we will allow visibility so that people can see each other. Neither the drawing that you have or the enhanced picture really indicate the fact that you're dealing with primary school children. They're smaller than rear view windows, and these people will be reversing out, traversing a pavement at really frustratingly busy times. We have children, buggies, parents. all of that, I do not believe, under your own reports and from your own planning officers, that can be negated.
That's time, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can now go back to your seats, please, and I'll call Councillor Bolton, who can now come and address the committee, please, with your comments. You're reminded you have 5 minutes in which to speak. We'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good evening. Yes, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, councillors, and thanks for the opportunity to address you from this side of the table for a change, which feels a little bit strange to me. It probably does slightly to you as well. I'd like to speak, of course, in opposition to the application that you're considering this evening, and I'm happy, very happy indeed, actually, to support the local residents of the Groves area in my ward, Coombe Vale, in this endeavour. Although there are a few of them here tonight, I'm well aware that this is an issue that has caused a lot of interest and a lot of upset in my ward. Rightly so, in my view. So, as far as I'm concerned, the development seems to me to be entirely unsuitable. And I'll run through some of the reasons why in a moment, although, of course, the residents you've just heard have outlined many of those. But can we please just dwell on this thought for a second? The planning officer's report says the following. Officers find, this is quoting, it says, officers find that the proposed development would involve the loss of a building which is considered to be of a pleasing appearance, which broadly ties in with the form and materiality of the locally listed building adjacent, and of course that's the school. They go on to describe the proposed new flats as, quotes, not an especially inspiring form of architecture, and I think that's probably an understatement. So, in a sense, councillors, you have it in a nutshell right there. By approving this scheme, you would be damaging the general Groves area by allowing the building of the bulldozing, I should say. You'd be allowing the bulldozing of an interesting and historic old cottage in favour of, dare I say it, a not especially nice block of flats. It's quite an easy decision to take, I think. You can save the cottage this evening, and I would urge you to save it while you still can, and actually give some meaning to the idea that here in Kingston, and I'm well aware that I'm a Kingston councillor, but some idea that here in the Royal Borough of Kingston, we are in fact taking our heritage seriously. There are numerous other reasons to object to this, of course, and that the residents have outlined many of them. But in short, we've mentioned the locally listed school, which is slap bang next door to this proposed development. I know the historic aspects of the school won't be lost on you, but in fact, as far as the school's concerned, there's congestion and potential road safety issues as well, which would be exacerbated by this development. And in fact, very shortly, we're to be meeting the head teacher of the school to discuss this very issue, and I don't see how plonking a new block of flats down right next door would help that issue at all. Lime Grove is too congested already, especially around the main school pick-up and drop-off times. And this will make things worse. I don't think anybody could argue that it wouldn't. So we have safety and congestion concerns. We have the fact that the site is in the Lime Grove area of special character. Surely that means something. The school is locally listed, as I said, and the rear boundary of the site, in fact, backs onto the Groves Conservation Area. So here are just, I'm probably running out of time, but here are some of the other issues that we should probably touch on. There's simply not enough car parking in this development. 2 places for 8 flats. That's not enough. Access to the area, traffic problems, noise, potential noise from 8 flats rather than 1 house, as at the moment. It's a dangerous part of the road as well. It's only single
1 minute
file
remaining.
at that point. Thank you. It's only single file at that point, so it's dangerous. More dangerous than the rest of the road. The design is not done with Lime Grove in mind either. It's essentially a cut and paste design from elsewhere. there'll be the overlooking of neighbours, as we've heard. So I'll quickly press on here. Applications for this site have already been turned down. As far as I can see, this one is not really much different. There's been a little bit of jiggling around here and there, as the officer has pointed out, but frankly, the removal of those balconies, in my view, actually makes it look worse, and I'm sorry that's the best we can do. So how often are residents meant to endure basically the same thing being brought back to the council for a decision time and time again? It doesn't seem fair to residents. Building a block of flats in an already tight area seems like a bad idea. So I really would urge you, councillors, to turn down the application this evening. I think the people of the Groves area and of Combe Vale in general deserve better than this, as does the borough as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. You may now take your seat. Thank you. I now welcome Rajan Patel to come to the desk to address the committee with your comments. As the applicant, you're reminded you have 5 minutes in which to speak. We will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. Thank you.
Is this on or? Oh, it's on. Okay. Okay, it's on. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just a quick thing. The CGI doesn't show the bollards, but it's just a CGI. That's all it is. It's not there as paramount. I heard the councillor talking about the issues of the appeal. The inspectors, on the very first appeal, only refused it on the grounds of access for the upper floor flats for the garden. On all other merits, the inspectors approved, generally, all other aspects of both the building designs and the siting. There was a scheme that I dealt with at 20 Villiers Road, which I originally looked at for this, but then we worked with officers to actually change the materials and the design and the fenestration with bays and simplifying the materials. So we have changed that working with officers over the past few months. We have removed the balconies that were the main issue for the inspector on the character issue. The scheme does provide 3 family dwellings, and the borough has a huge shortage of family dwellings. And it also provides 8 overall mix of dwellings in a sustainable location. We shouldn't be car-dominating sites all the time with parking spaces. It's not that far from New Malden High Street, bus services and railway lines, and it's right next to a school and around the corner from a nursery. So everybody within the flats, like at Cavana Court, can readily access amenities by cycling and walking, and that should be supported. The applicant's already submitted a car cap legal agreement to the council, so the agreement's already been signed by him, and it's with officers. In terms of the 5-year housing supply, the borough has about a 2.14 delivery at the moment from the latest data, which is significantly below the 5-year scheme. In terms of the overall quality of the building, all the flats meet or exceed the London Plan standards. The amenity space that's been provided normally is 50 square metres. I think in this case it's 147 square metres, so it's triple the standards that are required. There are back land developments at number 6 Lime Grove, and I can't remember is it number 3 or 4, with houses at the back of the sites as well. So it's not unusual to have buildings in the back of this particular plot. The building isn't listed or locally listed. The character is subjective in terms of whether a building is pleasing. I'm not saying it's not pleasing, but the inspector has found that the building can be demolished. And just generally from my own background, I was at this committee last year for Barton Green, and members approved that. And I've done 12 other schemes in the borough as an applicant for different people. And I grew up in the borough. We've delivered over 80 units from small sites. And even the MP has said small sites make a valuable collective contribution towards housing in the borough. These sites aren't land banked or put on hold by big developers. These are actually all being built out. The 4 schemes that I got approved last year are all under construction in Kingston. So they'll all be building out and supplying to the borough. So they're not land banked or things. And it isn't, I take issue when people say greedy developers. We build during the worst crisis of interest rates going up and cost inflation going up. Yet that's what we do. That's all we know what to do, is to build and design buildings. So we build on bad times and good times. So I don't take issue when people say, well, it's a greedy developer. It's delivering housing is what we know how to do for the borough at the end of the day. The building, as far as I'm concerned, does look attractive. It's in a mix of a road with Carnarvon Court, with another building which has got a mansard roof. There are 1930s semi-detached houses along the road. So it's a wide variety of buildings. There are buildings with accesses to the side as well. So, and the access that was put on the side was something that officers asked us to do. So we moved the access from the front to the side. So I hope it's something that members can take into account, the sustainability of the site and the encouragement of car-free development, which I always try to do myself. And, thank
1
you for
minute
your time.
remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Came in 1 minute under.
That's okay.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to just go back to your seat, Mr. Patel. Thank you to everybody who has made comments on that. So, do any members of the committee have any questions to ask for clarification from the objectors? Please put your hand up if you'd like to ask a question to the first people that spoke. No?
Including Councillor Bolton.
Oh, sorry, including Councillor Bolton. No? Okay. Do any members of the committee have any questions of the applicant to ask questions? I do. So if you'd come to the desk, thank you very much, and then I can ask my question. Thanks. Yeah, thank you very much. I have a couple of things. I noticed you have a green roof. How is the building, both buildings, blocks, going to be heated? Heated? How are you going to heat them, please? Thank you. That's my first question.
They could have heat pumps put in.
Sorry?
They could have heat pumps put in. That's subject to planning conditions normally.
I'll get the planning officer to come
Yeah.
back on. Yeah. But you must have an idea of what's going to be there, because on new builds, am I right in saying you can't put boilers in anymore? It has to be.
No, boilers can go in at the moment, but I think we're all trying to work to remove boilers where we can, kind of thing.
think on you-
these ones will probably be
Well,
boilerless.
perhaps Will can
Yeah.
confirm that. But obviously, you're going to have something there to heat water and the flats. What about on the green roof? Was there going to be any PV panels there, photovoltaic panels?
So there's a balancing act that once you submit the formal SUDS, I mean the SUDS reports has gone in, but once the officers resubmit it, they generally put a condition down again.
Right.
And they then do have to do a balancing act where they say you've got the betterment of the SUDS and the drainage that comes with the green roof and the biodiversity.
Yes.
And then if you start putting solar panels in, then that starts removing some of the diversity.
You have to put them somewhere, yes, yes, I appreciate
the
that.
officers way up in their conditions, I think it is.
Right. Okay.
There's no objection to solar panels, but it's one of those things.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think that's all I had. Thank you. You may go back to your seat.
No other questions, Chair.
Any other questions? Councillor Sillett, from whom?
Well, I actually have a question of clarity. Really, I would
From the officer?
from the officer to the officer.
Hang on, we'll get to that in a minute. Just, okay. So, I'm going to ask Will now to kind of clear up any references, any matters of clarification or comments from the contributors that he feels that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of some of the points raised by the objectors, so condition 10, that relates to visibility displays. So basically the applicant will have to incorporate sufficient visibility displays to the satisfaction of the neighbourhood traffic engineer prior to the occupation, the use of those spaces. So that's condition 10. In relation to the length of the pathway to the 2 studio flats at the rear and whether lighting would be incorporated. So condition 22, that requires secure by design certification, which includes matters such as security lighting, which of course will have to be angled downwards so as not to cause a nuisance to neighbours. In terms of general highway safety concerns, so In response to consultation on the current scheme before members, the neighbourhood traffic engineer has raised no objections. They are satisfied there wouldn't be any harm to highway safety or any harm to congestion, traffic levels, etc. in the area. This also aligns with what the inspector found with their recently dismissed appeal. The inspector was happy with the car parking arrangements and the widening of the crossover. And then also, just to clarify a point the applicant made, so the council currently has a 2.21 years worth of deliverable housing land supply. That's against our minimum target of a 5-year housing land supply. And this means that we have the so-called tilted balance is engaged, where if members were to identify any harms with the scheme, they would have to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing this many units at a time when the council doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. I think those were the main things I wanted to come back on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Will. I will now move the recommendations as set out in the agenda report. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. So now, any questions from members for the officer, please? Councillor Sillett, I think you raised your hand then. And then I'll open it up for debate. Thank you.
Mr. Hatti, how much weight should members of this committee put on the aesthetics? Because this is a local area special characteristics. There's an old, would you call it an arts and crafts cottage? I'm not sure how to describe it. I'm not an architect. But it has some architectural merit. It blends into the school. Opposite, you've got sort of Edwardian and Victorian houses. But right next door to it, you've got Cavanagh Court, and then the other side of the school, you've got, I think it's Lime Villas, another block of flats. So it is mixed. And I wonder if you can advise me on, and obviously this is a quasi, we have to abide by the restrictions here. It's not just a matter of subjects, but could you give me some advice on knocking down an old building is obviously putting up a fairly, I think, I mean, it's described by the planning inspector as uninspiring. What weight should we give this? Because part of our consideration is to protect the heritage and character of the area. But the area is so mixed, I'm a bit confused. You've got Cavanagh Court there, but if you turn back the other way, you've got Victorian and Edwardian houses, you've got the old school. So what weight should we give to this, the special characteristics of the area, considering it's already been degraded to a certain extent, if I can put it that way, by some blocks of flats that have changed the character of the area?
Thank you, councillors. The heritage assessment is detailed in paragraph 68 to 74 of the committee report, but I think you do put a very good point that, well, we're losing this relatively pleasing appearance building and its replacement with something which is more utilitarian in appearance. I think what's important to note is the building itself is not either locally listed or a listed building. So it's not been singled out as part of previous conservation area appraisals or the local area special character appraisals. So it has no extra planning policy protection which prohibits its demolition. So while we acknowledge that it is of a pleasing appearance, basically there's no solid planning policy which protects the retention of that building. In terms of it being demolished and its replacement, so we conclude in the officer report that the replacement building, it will have a neutral impact on the character of the local area of special character and the adjacent locally listed building. And as you pointed out, the area is quite mixed in character. You've got Kavanagh Courts, Cedar Courts. Further down the road, you've got further flatted developments. We've got the Hoodear House, prior approval, change of use to residential. So, as you quite rightly point out, the area of the character of the area has evolved over time. And within this context, it is considered that the proposed building is acceptable. So overall, we consider the character and appearance of the scheme as a whole is a neutral matter. It's not something which is enhancing the character of the area, but we do not conclude it is harmful to any of the heritage assets.
Thank you, Will. And a follow-up question?
Yes, please. I just read that the paragraph 205 of the MPPF states that when considering the impact of a proposed development, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation where there's a heritage asset, and that where paragraph 208 says that where development proposal would lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, it should be weighed against public benefits, i.e. providing housing. So, if this proposal was rejected on the grounds of basically aesthetics, I am concerned that could be rejected. I need some legal guidance, really, whether that would be thrown out on appeal, given that the planning inspector has said that he feels this is a neutral impact.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Chair. So in relation to paragraph 205 and up to 208 of the MPPF, now that is referring to designated heritage assets. The only designated heritage assets in this case is the conservation area to the rear. So in this case, because we have identified no harm to that conservation area to the rear, given that the only part of the development that will be really visible would be the two-storey development at the rear of the site, and that would not be visible from the public realm within that conservation area. So I don't think members could identify any harm to designated heritage assets. The relevant paragraph which refers to non-designated heritage assets, I think is 209 onwards. So if, for example, members were to think that there's some harm to the setting of the neighbouring school, a non-designated heritage asset, the MPPF directs that a balanced judgment would have to be made having regard to the scale of any harm and any loss of significance to that heritage asset. So yes, I don't think members could identify harm to a designated heritage asset. I think if we were to do so, we'd be at risk of costs at appeal. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Will. Does just before, anybody else? Councillor Park, and then I'll come back. Thanks.
Just I wanted to ask, because that area is the school and the cottage and another flat. So just I'm wondering, this is a residential area and they have a flat already. So I'm wondering whether there is any condition can be maybe restricted or approved, allowed to for the density in that area. Do they have any condition for planning permission? Because for me, it looks like that area, the characteristic is changing over. To be honest, the building was beautiful when I saw that one. But somehow I wanted to know whether, because the building is beautiful, if there is no condition, we can reject it. I can't, because I always think I need to think about it. But somehow, if you have any condition and density has to be restricted or limited in that area, I don't know whether you have that kind of condition. Just I wanted to ask that one first.
Thank you, Chair. So you're right, with the previous iteration of the London plan, there was a density matrix which set out, well, in areas of this level of accessibility and this character, generally you should not exceed a certain density. However, there is no such restriction in the current London plan. So what we're looking at here is the development by itself, is it acceptable from a character and design perspective? So there aren't any density kind of conditions or policies which apply in this case.
Also, I have one more question, is about the parking is 2 parking space on site, but its house is for 8 kind of units, 3 bedroom 3 and 1 bedroom 3 and 2 studio flat for 8, but only can they have a parking space only 2. And as the objectors there mentioned about the school has children quite young age. I don't know, is planning permission you have conditions and to be able to approve or not. But for my concern is how can we are kind of reassured the children's safety can be measured before we go ahead with this planning permission.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of highway safety, the neighbourhood traffic engineer who assesses these matters, they are satisfied there wouldn't be any harm. So they're satisfied, in their professional opinion, there would not be any harm to pedestrian or children safety from the 2 proposed car parking spaces. As the applicant indicated earlier, they would enter into a unilateral undertaking to restrict the remainder of the flats from applying for on-street car parking permits in the event that a future controlled parking zone is implemented. And then we also have the provision in the late material whereby the developer will make a contribution towards any consultation costs associated with the implementation of a controlled parking zone. And then also I would just add that in determining a very similar appeal, the planning inspector, they have also said they're happy from a highway safety perspective. So I think all our technical consultees, the planning inspectorates and officers are satisfied from a highway safety perspective. And we do obviously have those conditions relating to visibility displays kind of as an extra measure to make sure that everything is as it should be.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Thorpe and then back to...
Generally speaking, my expectation is that if we knock down an old building, we will build a new building which is much more sustainable and will be capable of being heated efficiently and effectively. So I'm slightly surprised that these properties will have boilers and that there's not really any solar panels. Sections on sustainability refers to water efficiency standards, but nothing about heating. Is that something we would now expect more often to see heat pumps rather than boilers? And are we comfortable with this being installed with boilers?
So in relation to the latest building regulations, we used to have a standard condition saying that developments of this type would achieve at least a 19% CO2 reduction in regulated carbon emissions when compared to the Part L building regulation baseline. So that certainly used to be the case. With the latest building regulations, they've obviously improved the emission standards a lot. So I would suggest that in order to meet the building regulations, and if solar panels aren't an option because of the green roof, it is likely that the applicants may need to do air source heat pumps. But unfortunately, no sustainability credentials were submitted as part of the application. However, if that is a concern of members, I think we could always add a condition requiring express approval of any air source heat pumps prior to installation, And of course, then we would have the environmental health officer review the sound levels and ensure that's all okay.
I would prefer that it's the direction we're going in as a council.
Yeah, can I just comment? Yeah, I thought that in all new builds now we had to have air source heat pumps. We couldn't have boilers, only in if you had to replace it in an older building. But I would like that put in as a condition for this, if that's okay. Did you have a supplementary question, Councillor Thorpe? No. Councillor Sillett?
Can I ask a question about the tilted balance that comes into effect because of the housing shortage, basically, or the land shortage? My understanding is that officers have decided that this does come into effect. Does that outweigh does that mean it outweighs considerations or balance of things like aesthetics and other things under the MPPF?
Thank you, Councillor Sillett. So in this case, yes, the tilted balance is in effect. There is no harm identified which would disengage it. And the MPPF is quite clear that basically we should approve development unless the harm of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So typically, and in my professional opinion, there would have to be a number of issues with the scheme in order to countenance a refusal. In my professional opinion, we'd have to be looking at maybe all the units being substandard in accommodation, maybe harming neighbouring amenity, maybe exacerbating flood risk, all of which aren't the case in this situation. So as we identify in the conclusion and planning balance section of the committee report, officers do not consider there to be any harm which would outweigh the benefits of providing the 8 units, 7 net increase, and the 3 three-bedroom units.
Thank you, Will. We'll go on to now debate if anybody has any debate, and then I will just give a bit of a sum up at the end. So if anybody has any comments they want to make, first of all, Councillor Thorpe.
Like all of us, I've spent some time thinking hard about this. It's not easy, this one. I think I take advice from Will that the harms have to outweigh the benefits, coupled with the fact that this has been through a rigorous process. This has been rejected and gone through an appeal process. And I don't think on that basis that I have any reason not to support the application.
Thank you. Anybody else like to make any comments? Councillor Sillett?
I would love to see that cottage staying where it is, but given the advice I'm given, I think that if it was rejected on aesthetic grounds, my understanding is that it would probably be overturned on appeal and it would cost this council many thousands of pounds. I'm also told that we cannot reject an application because of lack of parking, because of various rules that are outlined in the public pack. Although I acknowledge, I don't know where, I think this will exacerbate the parking. It's very congested in Lime Grove. This is not going to make it easier for residents, but my understanding is that we couldn't reject this on lack of parking. So I think that if this was rejected for those reasons, that it would come back, it would be overturned on appeal.
Thank you, Councillor Sillett. Yeah, so I'd just like to say, whilst I agree, I would love to see the cottage stay, and the replacement, if we're minded to approve, is not beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but it's just a fairly standard building. But it is giving extra housing, 3 three-bedroom units, family units, of which we're much in need of in Kingston. Whether you agree with that or not, that is the case. It's also a good use of a small site, of a site that's already been there, so you're not building on virgin land, if you like. It's on an old site. And you're getting 7 more people able to have a home than whereas only 1 at the moment. So from that point of view, I think those points are to be considered. And in that respect, I will be agreeing to permit on this one. Okay. So does anybody else have any more comments or want to come back on anything from the committee? Excuse me. This is a member, so yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we're going to go to the vote then. Yeah, okay. So those in favour, please raise your hands.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So that's unanimous. There are no urgent items this evening by the chair, so I close this meeting at 20:43. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody who listened online and for everybody who attended and came and gave their thoughts on the application today. Thank you very much and good evening.